Hey everyone, Jake here from CVP. Today we are taking a look at Panasonic's latest mirrorless camera, the LUMIX S1R II. And it's a pretty jam-packed high-resolution hybrid camera, but how does it compare to some of its competition, and does it offer enough to compete? Well, let's take a look. We didn't have the camera for very long, so this is going to be a bit of a stripped back review compared to what we would normally do for a camera review. However, we did manage to run it through some testing and take it out for a quick walk in Teddington with some other kit that we have in for testing at the moment as well. For this test footage, we used the Thypox Cymera C lenses in M mount adapted onto the camera and Panasonic's excellent 50mm f1.4 prime. The image quality this camera produces is very nice. It's detailed, has nice colour, and considering this footage is with the dynamic range boost mode turned off, dynamic range does look pretty decent. For these examples we shot in Vlog and then processed them through Resolve, colour space transforming them into Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Let us know what you think of the image down in the comments below. The S1R II features a newly developed 44.3 megapixel backside illuminated CMOS sensor with a resolution of 8144 by 5424 and a regular full frame size of 36 by 24mm. The camera has the same dynamic range boost mode that some of Panasonic's other cameras have as well. Official dynamic range numbers from Panasonic are that the camera can capture up to 13 stops in its regular mode and then 14 in its boost mode. Something that is odd though is that the S5 II or 2X don't have this mode, but on Panasonic's spec sheet they are rating those as 14 plus stops of range, which is more than the S1R II. But we'll see exactly how they compare in our Latitude tests in a bit. Toggling the boost mode on and off changes the dual base ISO, which in Vlog is 200 and 1000 with it off and 400 and 2000 with it on. In the camera's auto dual native mode, you can go through the ISO range fully and see the clear change in the noise pattern when you hit the upper limits. These are quite low base ISOs compared to some other cameras on the market that often have second bases closer to 6400 or more. This could be seen as a pro or a con depending on what you shoot. It also means that if you push the camera up to something like 12,800 ISO, it can get a bit noisy. This boost mode is limited to just your base frame rate, so no 50 or 60p, and you can't use it in the slow and quick mode either. When in this mode, the camera will grey out the formats that are not possible to use in the recording quality menu. It is off by default in the menu, but one handy thing is that you can assign it to one of the many custom function buttons on the camera in case you want to switch quickly on the fly. Oh, and you can only use this in the Vlog profile. Right, let's take a look at our Latitude tests. For these tests, we grabbed the S1R II and S5 II to see how they compare. We used our Nissi 50mm Athena across both cameras using the same PL adapter. Here's a breakdown of our methodology for these tests. Right, let's take a look at the results. For the S1R II, we shot with both the dynamic range boost mode on and off. Looking at overexposure first, we can see that the camera performs well up to 3 stops, and as we hit 4 stops, we can see Sam's skin starting to break. From here, we can see the skin and chart starting to break more and more. With the boost mode on, we can see it really helps retain highlight detail. It seems to be about a stop's worth better performance between the mode on and off. So if you can deal with the bump in base ISO and restricted frame rates, this will give you more highlight retention. If we compare the camera with boost mode on to the S5 II, they're very comparable, though maybe the S5 II handles Sam's skin a touch better. For our underexposure tests with the S1R II, we shot at both base ISOs and then also with the dynamic range boost mode on and off. Starting with boost mode off, we can see a difference between the base ISOs at the same stop, especially in regards to detail. So it's definitely worth enabling this mode if you're shooting in lower light. At -4 in the second base it looks good, but it does get pretty noisy from here. And with boost mode on, this is still the case. Comparing boost mode off and on at the same stop and ISO, we can see that there's actually quite a large difference. It looks like the boost mode has a little bit of CMOS smearing and a touch more noise. Compared to the S5 II in its low base mode, I think the S1R II looks much better as it gets towards the deeper stops. The S5 II definitely has a lot more visible smearing overall. We have just relaunched our Discord server, so if you want to chat to us and other industry professionals and aspiring creators, the link to join us is in the description below. The S1R II doesn't have a low pass filter, which is good for stills detail, but for video, most people will prefer to have one as they are used on a lot of higher end cinema cameras to counter moire. Looking at our focus chart, we can see that in the camera's 8.1K mode, there is clear moire and aliasing in the middle of our chart. So if you're planning on using this camera for video, this is something definitely worth bearing in mind. But honestly, this is the same when using any high resolution mirrorless camera that doesn't have a low pass filter. With the camera not having an LPF though, it does mean that you can capture some really detailed stills and video. Up next, let's check out how this camera handles infrared light pollution. For these tests, we grabbed a range of different black fabrics, as different types will behave differently to each other, and then blasted an Ari blonde at them. We then went through the range of our Polar Pro variable ND, adjusting aperture on our lens to keep exposure consistent. This is an unnamed camera with its OLPF removed, as an extreme example of what IR pollution can do to your image. Looking at our test results, we can see that from clear to 5 stops of ND, there's no real purple shifts at all, and this is also what we've experienced when shooting outside as well. Performance here is really good, so this really isn't something you need to worry about when using this camera. Right, let's talk about the camera's sensor readout speed. When you turn on the dynamic range boost mode function, the readout speed of the sensor slows down. We didn't realise this when we ran our controlled readout speed testing, so we don't want to publish our numbers without knowing 100% what mode we were in. I'm incredibly frustrated that I didn't get these tests with the boost mode on and off. But with how little time we get with these cameras sometimes, and how fast we have to turn around these videos, stuff like this can happen sometimes, unfortunately. Fortunately though, we do know that when we shot some more visual examples outside, we had the boost mode toggled on. So for these examples, you are seeing the camera with its highest readout speed. As you can see, it does suffer from some pronounced jello during these exaggerated whip pans. So for some productions or shooters, this may cause some issues. But for the most part, it's manageable, and during our time out shooting with the camera, with the boost mode off, we didn't really notice it too much. On the left hand side of the camera, you now have a new mode dial where you can switch between stills, video and slow and quick modes. In this new slow and quick mode, you can shoot 5.9K 10-bit 420 long op and Cinema 4K 42 10-bit intra up to 60 frames per second, and Cinema 4K 420 10-bit long op and Full HD 420 10-bit long op up to 120 frames per second, all while using close to the full frame width of the sensor. When you switch the camera into ProRes, you are able to capture Cinema 4K 42 HQ up to 60 frames in either the full sensor or pixel by pixel sensor mode, and up to 100 in Full HD across both of these modes too. It all looks nice. The 4K 120 and ProRes stuff specifically looks really good. The Full HD footage is a bit soft, but that's not too surprising compared to the higher resolution footage. One note here is that you can't enable the dynamic range expansion mode when in SNQ, so you are limited a little bit when you enter this mode. As you should probably expect from Panasonic now, the S1R II has a large range of different recording formats across a few different codecs. You have the ability to switch between ProRes, MOV and MP4 formats, and there are so many to choose from now. You then have full frame, APS-C and pixel by pixel formats, which will change what frame rates, bit depth and chroma subsampling you can choose from as well. Here's a graphic showing the different formats. I love that you can shoot so many different formats in this camera, but it can be a bit confusing. Being able to shoot ProRes and ProRes RAW internally is also fantastic. We mainly shot ProRes 422 when we were out shooting on location, and the footage looks really good. Weirdly, the camera has slight crops and changes as you switch between even the full frame formats. You can also shoot in a 3x2 open gate mode, though currently this is limited to 6.4K, but Panasonic should be releasing firmware to unlock 8K open gate, which will be a great addition for the camera. Being able to record 3x2 is really helpful for modern day video, as so many projects require 16:9, 1:1 and 9:16 delivery, so the extra height of 3x2 is really useful to get the absolute most out of a single rush. You also have the ability to enable proxy video recording if you chuck an SD card in alongside your primary recording media. The camera also has a range of anamorphic D-squeezes built in, and a 4.7K 4x3 anamorphic format, which would be great for Super 35 2x anamorphic glass, and then of course you have the 3x2 open gate mode, which would be great for 1.5x full frame anamorphics. Panasonic have had some of the best in-camera stabilisation for a while now, and the S1R II is another step up in specification and performance. This new camera can provide up to 8 stops of stabilisation, which is about 3 stops extra over the S5 IIs. When it comes to video, there are a few different modes depending on what situation you are in. You have the regular stabilisation, then E-stabilisation, which has 3 different modes: cropless, standard and high. Cropless is a new mode and corrects distortion at the edges of the frame without cropping the image, whereas the standard and high modes crop into your field of view to help give you a more stable image. From the limited testing we managed to do, the cropless mode performs well. You can see a little bit of distortion sometimes towards the corners, and the frame can look a little electronically stabilised with a slight jittiness to it, but overall it's very impressive. You then have the extra boost modes and even an anamorphic mode. So yeah, as always, Panasonic have delivered another excellent stabilisation system. As you would expect from the S1R II, it has a range of different colour profiles built in, including a new one called Cinelike A2. Here's how it looks versus some of the other ones in the camera. It also uses Panasonic's full Vlog profile, so there are plenty of scientific and creative LUTs for it out there now. With that, you also have the ability to load in your own LUTs and even record video and take photos with them burnt in. This would be nice if you are looking to shoot with a specific style in mind for faster turnaround deliveries or social content. If you want to keep up with the latest and greatest kit, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to buy anything you see in this video, or you want to get your hands on the S1R II or any other kit for that matter, head over to cvp.com where our experienced team is waiting to help you. With the S5 II, Panasonic really upped the performance of their autofocus system, and earlier this year they actually improved the performance even further in a few of their cameras with some new firmware. And the S1R II features another leap in performance even above those. Just like the S5 II, it's a phase detect contrast hybrid system that uses 779 points and updated algorithms for subject detection and tracking. This means that it has an updated range of subjects to choose from for tracking as well, including motorcycles or bikes, cars and animals. We wanted to see how this new system performed against the S5 II, so we ran some side-by-side tests using the same 20-60mm lens across them both and the same autofocus settings, which were basically set up to be as fast as possible. Looking at the results, the S1R II looks a touch faster, but both do an excellent job at tracking Sam. Even when he's pretty small in the frame, the camera still knows that he's a human and it needs to track him. We also chucked the Panasonic 50mm f1.4 on wide open, and even with such a narrow depth of field, the camera tracks really well with no real pulsing or lagging. It is impressive what Panasonic have managed with these new autofocus systems for video, especially considering their previous systems. Similar to the GH7, you can use Panasonic's XLR2 module with this new camera to give you a serious audio upgrade. Not only does it add XLR inputs and a bunch of control, but it also unlocks the ability to record 32-bit flow audio. I really wish this was something that was built into the camera body by itself, but it's good to see this anyway. Panasonic was actually the first camera brand to bring 32-bit float into a camera, so this is great to see again. And it will be super helpful for loads of solo and run and gun style filmmakers. The scratch mics are also pretty decent quality on this camera, but you of course have a 3.5mm mic input for use with any of the many available microphone systems out there now. The S1R II features both a CF Express Type B and SD UHS 2 slot. This means that you can use nice fast V90 SD cards for a lot of the recording formats, but internal data rates above 800 megabits per second require you to use Type B. You can also record to a USB SSD if you'd rather as well. Just make sure it's mounted nice and secure and can handle the data rates needed for your chosen recording format. It's great to see the camera use CF Express Type B here. The S1R II will also be able to output ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW with future planned firmware for the camera and recorders. Panasonic have always been great at jamming loads of video focus features into their cameras, and the S1R II is no different, and even has a few new ones. My favourite new addition has to be false colour. This is great to finally see in a Panasonic camera, though it is handled a bit weirdly. When you toggle it, it disables it when you re-enter the menu. I would suggest binding this onto a button or putting it into the Q menu to make it easier to reach. They've also added a new function called Shutter Speed Limiter. This limits your shutter speed to your base frame rate. So if you have your frame rate set to 25, it means you can't go lower than 1/25th of a second. Personally, I would have found limiting your shutter speed to double your base frame rate more useful than this function. This camera is running pre-release firmware, so performance will most likely improve when the camera starts shipping. Physically, the camera has changed a good amount from the previous one. It's similar in size to the S5 II, which is quite a bit smaller than the S1 or the S1R. It shares a lot of its design with the S5 II as well. It's dust and splash resistant, has a nicely integrated fan system, and tally lamps on the front and back. It has a nice tilty, fully rotating LCD, which means you can tilt the monitor up while still having cables plugged in. It also has a nice fast OLED EVF, which is great to see as well. There is also a new shutter closing function, which you can toggle on and off in the menu. Here you can choose whether you want this to be open or closed when you power down the camera. This shutter mechanism is rated for up to 400,000 actuations. The S1R II is obviously a hybrid camera, and that means it packs some pretty decent still specifications as well. 44 megapixels is a nice resolution for stills, and while it may be overkill for some, it's undeniably nice to have a high resolution camera for a lot of applications. It's also pretty fast as well. It can capture up to 40 frames per second blackout free, but this does change across the different RAW quality modes and focusing modes. Here's a chart with the different speeds and details about the pre-burst mode as well. It also has a new high resolution mode that combines 8 images together to create a 177 megapixel still. There is even a handheld mode for this now as well. Lastly, you can also now tether into Capture One, which for studio photographers will be very helpful. The S1R II is priced at just under £3,000 including VAT. This positions it well under Canon, Sony and Nikon's high resolution counterparts. And if you're in the market for a high resolution hybrid, the S1R II is definitely worth considering, as it does offer quite a lot for its price. It can capture good looking imagery, has a range of excellent recording modes, open gate formats, has excellent stabilisation, a solid autofocus system and a plethora of video focus features. If you want to come in and test this camera out for yourself, you can book an appointment at our UK and European showrooms where you can get your hands on it, rig it up and check out some lenses with one of our knowledgeable technical consultants. If you want to book an appointment, drop demo@cvp.com and email. Anyway, let us know if you have any other questions about the S1R II in the comments. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.